Have you ever wondered why we're so bad at predicting financial markets? I mean, for decades, we've built these incredibly complex mathematical models to forecast pretty much everything. And yet, over and over, they just fail spectacularly. So we're going to dive into this, because what if the key to a better forecast wasn't in more complex math, but in a place you'd probably least expect, the world of sports gambling? We're about to explore why our beautiful theories of rational markets keep getting totally shattered by the ugly reality of human behavior.
You know, this quote from Thomas Huxley, it just perfectly nails the story for today. It's about this beautiful, elegant idea of how the world is supposed to work, and then the messy, unpredictable, and very human reality that just comes along and proves it wrong. But this isn't just a tragedy. It's actually an opportunity to understand things on a much, much deeper level. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with a big theory that dominated the 20th century, the myth of efficient markets. Then we'll pinpoint the exact moment when all the models just broke. After that, we'll explore the powerful force they completely missed, the madness of crowds, and discover a really fascinating way to actually measure it using something called gambling shocks. And finally, we'll see what this new way of forecasting the irrational can really tell us. So, for over 50 years, there was this one beautiful hypothesis that basically reigned supreme in economics. It was the bedrock of investing, it was taught in every business school, and it had a simple, powerful name: the efficient market hypothesis. And you know, the crazy thing about the EMH is how logical it sounds. It just assumes that all of us are rational, we take in all the information out there, news, data, reports, and the market price instantly absorbs all of that collective knowledge. And the result? Well, price movements become essentially random and impossible to predict. You just can't consistently beat a market that already knows everything. And make no mistake, this wasn't some fringe theory. As the economist C.W.J. Granger put it, the random walk model was seen as the only way markets could possibly function if everyone was out there trying to make a buck. It was clean, it was mathematical, and it gave everyone a very reassuring view of the world. It was the beautiful hypothesis. But, as Huxley warned us, every beautiful hypothesis eventually has to meet its ugly fact. And that brings us to our next part: when the models broke. Look, every great story needs a conflict, and for the efficient market hypothesis, that conflict came as a global meltdown. The beautiful theory was about to get slain. Think about it. The entire system of modern finance, all the incredibly complex models, all the risk assessments, all the predictions, it was all balancing on this one single fragile idea: the belief that people and companies would, for the most part, act rationally in their own self-interest. And in 2008, that idea just crumbled. The global financial crisis wasn't just a bad day on the stock market. It was a total failure of the models. It was an event so far outside of what the rational models said was possible that it was basically a statistical impossibility. And yet, it happened. The ugly fact had arrived. And this right here, this is the moment of reckoning, when Alan Greenspan, one of the most powerful financial figures on the planet, admitted this to Congress. It was absolutely stunning. It was like the high priest of the old religion admitting that the core belief that rational self-interest would save us was just plain wrong. Okay, so if the models were wrong, then what did they miss? If markets aren't always driven by cool, calculated reason, then what are they? Well, the answer, it turns out, is something a lot older and a lot more human. This was written way back in 1841 by Charles Mackay, long before any of these complex financial models existed. He saw a fundamental truth about us. We're social creatures. We move in herds. And sometimes those herds aren't guided by logic at all. They're guided by fear, greed, euphoria, what the economist John Maynard Keynes later called our animal spirits. This is the madness of crowds. So this really lays out the two competing worldviews. On one side, you've got the old model: perfect, rational people in a perfectly efficient market. And on the other side, you've got the challenger: behavioral economics. It accepts that we have bounded rationality, we're not computers, and we're definitely driven by those animal spirits. And that means markets aren't always efficient. They can get emotional and become wildly inefficient. Okay, so it's one thing to say markets are run by some madness of crowds, but that's a pretty fuzzy idea. How do you actually measure that? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where sports gambling comes in, because it gives us a surprisingly perfect little laboratory for putting a number on human irrationality. I mean, it sounds impossible, doesn't it? How do you take a messy, emotional concept like market panic or total euphoria and just turn it into a cold, hard number? A number that you can analyze and maybe even predict?
The answer is this really clever concept called a gambling shock. See, in sports, the bookmaker's line, like the point spread, that's the market's collective guess for how a game will turn out. The gambling shock is just the difference between that expectation and what actually happened. It's a direct numerical measurement of the crowd's surprise.
Let's make this super concrete. Let's say the market, the bookie's line, expects Team A to win by 7 points, okay? That's the collective wisdom. That's the efficient prediction. But then the game happens, and Team A just blows them out, winning by 17 points.
So the gambling shock is just the result minus the expectation. 17 minus 7 gives us a gambling shock of plus 10. Now that number isn't just a score. It's a measurement of how wrong the market's prediction was. It is a quantified surprise. It's a number for the madness.
And this is the real game changer. This is the fundamental shift in thinking. The goal isn't to predict what the market is going to predict. No, the real breakthrough comes when you start trying to predict the error in the market's prediction. The key is to forecast the shocks themselves. So now that we can actually put a number on this irrationality, what do we do with it? Well, that brings us to our final section, forecasting the irrationality. If we can measure these shocks, what do they really tell us? What kind of new forecasting ability does this give us?
And here is the really critical part. These shocks aren't just random static. They represent real human factors. A huge upset, a massive shock, that could be caused by mental lapses on the field, or maybe a surge in team motivation. The research even suggests it can reflect physiological things, like testosterone levels. These shocks are signals of the human drama playing out, and they actually have predictive power for what happens next.
This quote from Paul DeGrauw just brings it all home. The old models were great at calculating what one imaginary, totally rational person might do, but they were completely blind to the collective, often irrational, movements of a real crowd. To be useful, our models have to get messy. They have to start trying to calculate the madness.
So here's the big thought I want to leave you with. If these unpredictable shocks we see in sports and financial markets aren't just statistical noise, if they're actually the signature of our own behavior, our emotions, our biases, our surprises, all made visible in the data, then what does that really mean for predicting the future? Maybe the goal isn't to build a perfect crystal ball, but to get better at understanding the beautifully, maddeningly irrational force that's truly shaping our world.